30. Centaur at flight press. 25.
Status check. Go Atlas. Go Centaur. Go Starliner. Godspeed, Butch and Sunny.
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff of Starliner and Atlas V, carrying 2 American heroes, drawing a line to the stars for all of us.
Commander Butch Wilmore there, calling down to Mission Control here in Houston that the spacecraft has begun rolling into the right attitude for its ascent, and the Guidance, Navigation, and Control Officer here in the room seeing good data on that.
Starliner passing through max Q, or the point of maximum dynamic pressure where the forces of air friction are highest, which in Sunny will shortly be passing through Mach 1, where the speed of sound.
You got a good throttle up.
Starliner and Atlas looking good with speeds and attitude increasing as expected. Coming up in less than 20 seconds, the solid rocket boosters will run out of fuel and burn out.
Good SRB burnout. Good SRB.
Now that the fuel in the solid rocket boosters has been depleted, the Atlas main booster stage will be continuing its burn for about the next 3 minutes.
Good handle. Good handle.
That call, good handle, from Capcom Joshua Kutrick, indicating that the crew now has the ability to initiate an abort manually if needed. All looking good so far. Now 2 minutes into Starliner's flight and coming up on the solid rocket booster jettison at the 2-minute and 40-second mark.
CLG and net, good trajectory. CLG.
The solid rocket boosters have now been jettisoned after seeing Starliner through its first 90 seconds of flight. Team on the ground here confirming that it was a good jettison and that the vehicle's trajectory continues to look good. Now 3 minutes into today's flight.
Atlas booster now throttling back to limit the G-forces on Butch and Sunny, trying to limit that to around 3.5 times the force of gravity you would feel while on the ground.
Staging.
here on the ground.
Decals open. You have sublimator act.
Decal sub-act. Decal. Great act.
Team on the ground reporting that they saw the ascent cover on top of Starliner that's been protecting the spacecraft's docking system through its climb into orbit. They saw that jettison as planned.
Staging was good. You have good control.
And now the second stage's 2 Centaur engines have ignited to continue pushing Starliner into space, fueled by liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. The next milestone that we'll be watching for is the aeroskirt jettison.
Starliner, you had good booster performance. You're up to plus 31.
Plus 31.
Atlas Control reporting booster performance offset of 31 seconds of ISP, or specific impulse, relative to its design baseline of around 450.
All continuing to perform well, almost 7 minutes into today's flight.
Good Centaur.
Good Centaur.
Capcom Joshua Kutrick continuing to pass good news up to Starliner's crew. At last one reporting that the Centaur upper stage remains in good condition and is performing well, pushing them into orbit.
St. John's open.
St. John's.
Starliner is now entering its first guided abort range, where Starliner would direct itself towards a specific location in the event of abort. In this case, just off the coast of St. John's, the capital of the Canadian province of Newfoundland, Labrador.
Starliner, MECO converged 11:5 to 11:52. Good perf, you're at 34 to 36 seconds.
11:52, 34 seconds.
That call letting the crew know that the main engine cutoff, MECO, should happen just about on time, about 12 minutes into today's flight. Another good indication that Starliner's ascent is taking along exactly as expected. Main engine cutoff is a major milestone marking Starliner's arrival on orbit. Still got about 2.5 minutes until we get to that, with the spacecraft continuing to perform well, make its way towards orbit.
No action, Starliner, on the LCL. That's just the system coming up into controlling mode.
Outstanding. No action.
Once the main engine is cut off, the next step will be the launch vehicle separation. That's set to occur just short of 15 minutes after launch, when Starliner will separate from the rocket and fly free in space for the first time. Flight Dynamics officer reporting that at this point, Starliner could potentially make an abort
Starliner,
landing
yep,
off
good
the coast of
cooling.
Ireland.
Good cooling.
And they're, again, all continuing well, so we're not expecting to need that abort.
As Starliner is rapidly approaching orbital velocity, this abort region is only available for just over 1 minute, where Starliner would just continue up to orbit after that.
Thirty seconds, D'Amico.
Just 30 seconds to go. Now until main engine cutoff, marking Starliner's arrival on orbit.
Nominal MECO Starliner.
Nominal MECO.
And with that nominal MECO call, that's main engine cutoff. We've got good energy, meaning a good velocity for continuing to orbit, and a good plane, meaning Starliner's trajectory is aligned with the International Space Station for rendezvous tomorrow.
And with that, Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams returned to orbit. Individually, they are both extremely experienced astronauts.
14:5 to 14:52.
14:52.
They're both very experienced astronauts with a combined total of 489 days in space between them. Starliner is also the third spacecraft that they've launched in. Both have traveled to the International Space Station via space shuttles and Soyuz and are now well on their way to repeating the journey via Starliner. It's also worth noting that Williams' role as pilot marks the first time that a woman has crewed a flight test of an orbital spacecraft.
Just a few seconds ago, you heard Capcom Joshua Kutrick calling up to Butch and Sunny. With the expected time, Starliner will separate from Centaur at about 14 minutes, 52 seconds into flight, just under 2 minutes from now, or 1 minute from now.
That is actually the last major milestone for Starliner's ascent. All the hard work is done, but we need for Starliner to be flying on its own before it can begin heading towards the International Space Station. There's a slight pause in the action here while Centaur repressurizes and does some attitude control. We'll get into the right orientation to send Centaur on its way and then jettison it and move into the right orientation for the orbital insertion burn, which will come about 31 minutes into flight.
No action on the cabin temp Starliner.
No action.
And about 10 seconds until an expected launch vehicle separation.
LVSEP confirmed.
Good LVSEP.
And now that Starliner has separated from this Centaur upper stage, we have a big thank you to our partners at ULA, providing Butch and Sunny a smooth ride to space.
That is not the end of today's orbit activity, though. The team will now be getting ready for the orbital insertion burn, which comes 31 minutes after flight. So that's still about 15 minutes away now. Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore will be getting their tablets out and doing a few other activities to get Starliner ready for that. And that will be one of the, that will be the first in a series of burns that will set Starliner on its way to the International Space Station. Once again, Starliner with astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams on board launched from Florida, the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Launch Pad 41 at 9:52 a.m. Central, 10:52 a.m. Eastern today, and they have now made it into orbit.
Your nominal TDRS show MDL is active. You have good targeting for OI.
Good targeting.
With the call for good targeting and information about Starliner's TDRS schedule being good, means that we've got good communication with the ground. TDRS is the tracking relay data satellites that Starliner uses to talk to the ground, and the flight controllers on the ground are seeing the dynamic.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if you could relay a message to our brethren at ULA.
We're all listening. Go ahead.
Yeah, they've been a member of the family for a long time, but now it's official, and we want to welcome them to human spaceflight.
We all copy all and really appreciate the words.
And Houston Starliner, we are on the tablets and in insertion monitor.
Copy tablets, we're with you, insertion monitor.
So the crew have their tablets out, so no longer using the paper procedures now that the vehicle has stopped moving so quickly. So there's a handful of things that the crew's going to do now, mostly just prepare the inside of the cockpit so they are looking at the right data to prepare for the upcoming orbital insertion burn. The vehicle itself has done a few things recently. Started to power on the solar rays on the back of Starliner and turning off several of the thrusters that are no longer needed at this phase of flight. Upcoming in about 4 minutes, Starliner is going to start to orient itself in the direction it needs to do the orbital insertion burn. And the crew inside the vehicle will be turning the wireless access point on and allow them to stream some of the data from the spacecraft onto their procedure tablets.
And Houston Starliner, last arm is off. Backup control switches, enable 1 on, enable 2 off. SM RCS is the mode.
We copy off. Enable 1 is on, enable 2 is off. SMRCS, you're in a good config.
Good config.
Your EXDV targets are on board and good.
Good EXTV.
Things will be pretty quiet as Starliner gets into position for the orbital insertion burn. That's still about 10 minutes away. Starliner is actually designed to be pretty autonomous and, in fact, docked with the space station on its last trip around without the help of any crew on board. But we do still want to know that if needed, Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams could take control and manually abort the spacecraft's approach to the station if they needed to. So to prove that, one of the few things on their agenda after they reach orbit will be to perform a test of the manual piloting mode.
This test will involve first pointing Starliner's nose towards the Earth so that its communication antenna on the back of the service module is pointed at the satellites, the teeter satellites that allow it to communicate with the team on the ground. They'll then move Starliner so that its solar arrays are pointed at the sun, showing they could charge Starliner's internal batteries as needed. And they'll follow that up with a demonstration of the star trackers, one of the ways that Starliner determines where it is in space, pointing Starliner away from Earth so that the system, the Vesta system, can get a good look at the stars.
The next step will be for the crew to manually speed Starliner up and then slow back down, which will slightly raise and then lower their orbit and prove that they can manually break away from the orbit that the space station is in if they needed to. At that point, they can move on to the last
Starliner,
items of the
still no
test.
action on your cabin temp. You're in a good config. It's 74 degrees in there. Yeah, that's just due to the T2 sensor sitting beside the light. So we're actually going to inhibit that particular sensor. We'll let you know when we bring it back online.
Okay, great. Looks like we're on our way to thrust align.
Concur.
Josh Kutrick calling up that the crew can ignore some alarms they're seeing on the temperatures inside Starliner. That's just a result of one of the sensors being next to a light that's causing it to show higher than it actually is. But it sounds like the crew are pretty comfortable and are getting into place for that orbital insertion. As I was saying, after they have manually broken away from the orbit of, proven that they can manually break away from the orbit of the space station, they are going to move on to the last items of their test for tonight. That's manually moving Starliner into the right orientation for re-entering the atmosphere, and then moving back into the attitude that will let them soak up some sun with the solar arrays and try a different method of manually charging the spacecraft's batteries. But again, once that all has to wait until after the orbital insertion burn. This is, again, the first of several burns that will put Starliner on its way to the International Space Station. We've still got about 6.5 minutes until we fire up the engines for that burn.
Starliner, we did not see the hand controller deflection. Just wanted to know if you did that yet.
No, we'll get it now.
All good.
Team here on the ground seeing that everything is looking like it's in the right configuration for the orbital insertion burn. Now less than 5 minutes away. Starliner is currently about 102 miles above the Mediterranean Sea, heading southeast over India in the next few minutes.
Starliner, good config for the OI burn.
Good config for OI.
And good config from the OI burn. Crew and ground control is noting that Starliner is pointed in the direction it needs to for the OI burn. It should also be about the time that the crew are using their tablets for their procedures, also charging them, keeping them topped up for the rest of the rendezvous.
We unfortunately won't have a view of Williams and Wilmore as they work through this procedure. Although we had a view of them from inside the cabin on the ground, Starliner isn't able to send that view to us again until it gets to the International Space Station. So you'll be seeing this screen quite a bit as Starliner was getting into the right position for the burn. And actually just now you can see some of the engines firing that help it steer and move around in space. And you can also see what attitude it's in at any given time. Lots of good information on this screen.
It is. A lot of this information actually directly mimics the views that the crew is seeing, especially the one in the upper left-hand panel. That is an exact copy of the display the crew is using for their attitude directional indicator. It also covers what mode their translational hand controller and the translational pointing is in. On the left side, on the right side, the pointing guidance, which tells the Starliner in automated mode which direction to point, or when in manual mode, which direction the crew needs to move the vehicle, like we're going to do in some of the manual piloting maneuvers. And following back up a little bit on the camera conversation, there is a planned upgrade of the Mustang system that we should see on our PCM-1 mission that will include live feeds from inside the cockpit.
And the Mustang system is the cameras that we were seeing views from earlier.
That's correct. There's a handful of cameras around the inside of Starliner. We often see the one from kind of beneath Butch and Sunny. That's given one of the better views without being directly right in their face while they're inside the cockpit during pre-launch. But once they're in orbit, they've gotten out of their seats a little bit, and we should be able to see a little bit more around the cabin.
We will, though, as you've already heard, continue to hear regular audio updates from the crew. Everything going well now that Starliner is just under 30 minutes into today's flight. We've got about a minute and a half left to go into that orbital insertion burn that will be kind of the final end cap, really, to today's ascent, which, again, took place at 10:52 a.m. Eastern when Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams launched inside the first Starliner to carry crew members on board from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Launch Pad 41. They made it to orbit about 14 minutes later, and now we are just again waiting for this first of a series of burns that will set Starliner on its way to a rendezvous with the International Space Station that is scheduled to take place at 12:15 p.m. Eastern, 11:15 a.m. Central tomorrow.
And we're coming up at about 40 seconds till the orbital insertion burn. This burn is going to take Starliner out of its slightly suborbital trajectory and push it up to an altitude that will allow us to catch up with ISS for a rendezvous later tomorrow.